I was devastated. My whole identity was like Hala Hot 97. I was kind of getting popular on Twitter. This is before social media was a thing. So having 5,000 followers on social media was like you were an influencer, right? So I was like Hala from Hot 97 on Twitter, and all my email addresses were Hala Hot 97. Suddenly it was like somebody died, and I was devastated that I lost this job. And I wasn't only fired, I was blackballed.
Welcome to the 9 to 5 Quitters Club, the podcast uncovering the creator entrepreneurs at the forefront of a work revolution. Today we're speaking with Hala Taha, CEO of YAP Media, host of the top 100 podcast Young and Profiting, and creator of the #1 self-improvement podcast network that grows and monetizes 35-plus top business shows. In this episode, we'll hear how Hala transformed devastating career rejections into the foundation for her thriving media empire.
So that's what I do now, and it was not an overnight success. I worked my butt off for the last 10, 12 years trying to make this happen. So I actually started my career in radio. I used to work at Hot 97, which is a really popular radio station in New York. And when I was in college, I got an internship at that station.
She shares her unique approach to building a business based on audience needs.
And if you have like the general thing of what you like to talk about, then you can just start to ask your audience, like, what do you want from me? They'll tell you what they want. Like an example with me is I never wanted to start a social media podcast agency. It was not on my radar.
And make sure to stick around till the end for Hala's crucial advice for anyone looking to build their own career outside of the traditional 9 to 5.
I would say you got to get started. Get started as a side hustle if you're in corporate. I'm so happy now because I have so much freedom and I have so much job security and I have so many revenue streams and so much going on that like I see my friends who just stayed in corporate, they're laid off, they're struggling to get jobs, they're getting contract work, and they have no job security.
This episode is a masterclass in resilience, creative problem solving, and how to build a thriving business by listening to your audience and taking relentless action even in the face of rejection. Let's dive in, and we hope you enjoy this conversation with Hala Taha.
So first off, I have a top 100 podcast called Young and Profiting. I am the CEO of YAP Media. It's an award-winning social media and podcast agency. And then I also have a pretty new podcast network, but is now the #1 self-improvement podcast network. And I grow and monetize like 35 other top business shows. So that's what I do now. And it was not an overnight success. I worked my butt off for the last 10, 12 years trying to make this happen. So I actually started my career in radio. I used to work at Hot 97, which is a really popular radio station in New York. And when I was in college, I got an internship at that station. I was 19 years old, and I ended up dropping out of school for 2 years to work at the station full-time for 2 years, essentially. And I ended up being the apprentice of Angie Martinez, who was this really popular like radio personality. She was the voice of New York. She was at the top of her field. And she had a really popular like music show where she'd interview celebrities. And I was responsible to do all the research, to do audio editing, to answer the phones, to run contests. And I was like the clean intern apprentice, training all the other interns for 2 years, working at the station. Now, all my siblings, I have 3 siblings, and they were at the time like all like in med school or in residency. And here I was working for free. I dropped out of school and I still worked for free at the station, even though I was working full time. That's how it goes in radio. So literally working for free every day. And I would make my money hosting showcases and concerts at night and going around with the DJs and helping them with their parties. And that's how I used to make money. And I was like sleeping on my brother's couch, like just like trying to make everything happen. But 2 years into it, I was getting really insecure. I was like, I need a job. I need money. I need like a consistent job. Like, it's not fair. I'm like the producer of this show and I'm not getting paid. And like, it's just getting ridiculous. And so I asked for a job. And when I did, I got fired, which was crazy. And I was like devastated. My whole identity was like Hala Hot 97. I was like kind of getting popular on Twitter. This is before social media was a thing. So like having 5,000 followers on social media was like you were an influencer, right? So I was like Hala from Hot 97 on Twitter, and like all my email addresses were Hala Hot 97. Suddenly it was like somebody died. And I was like devastated that I lost this job. All my friends, my mentors, and I wasn't only fired, I was blackballed. Angie told everybody that like, I think I think they thought that I would come back and like they were like trying to teach me a lesson to like just like wait in line. And I got blackballed, and like literally the DJs called me up and were like, Hala, we can't talk to you anymore. And I was like, what? Like, you're my best friend. What are you talking about? You know? And it was like, everybody told me like they can't talk to me anymore. So it was a crazy experience. And I was like, you know what? F this. I want to build a platform to empower other women. I want to recruit all the other girls in the entertainment industry, in the hip hop industry that don't get opportunities, that always get like overworked, underpaid. And I decided to start recruiting girls on Twitter to start a blog. Blogs were really hot back then. And I wanted to start something called the Sorority of Hip Hop. And it was a new blog. And I went on Twitter and Craigslist and recruited 14 girls within 2 weeks of getting fired. Started this blog. I learned how to blog from DJ Enough and Funkmaster Flex from the station. They had blogs. So like I already knew how to blog. I figured out how to build a website, started this blog, went back to school to finish my undergrad. Within 3 months, we were one of the most popular entertainment sites in the world. Right away, MTV caught wind and was like, we want to do a reality TV show pilot, film me. We were doing online radio shows on the side. And they were like, you look confused. The reason why we got so popular, I'll tell you one thing, is that like I figured out how to like hack Twitter a little bit. And basically, you know how on Twitter people will have a blog and like they'll like at whoever's mentioned in the blog and then there'll be like a link to the blog, which is like a common thing. If an article gets released, it will be like at Drake releases new song, blah, blah, blah. Here's the link. I was the first one to do that, to automate blogs, to tweet out and like just think about like the innovative thing that I did is I just added the at symbol so that it would like trigger actually mentioning somebody on Twitter. So during this period when I had this blog, at any given time, we had like 50 to 100 girls blogging on this website, the Sorority of Hip Hop. And I hooked up all their stuff on social media. And every time we put out a blog, it'd be like 50 girls tweeting Drake. And then he'd retweet one of us. So we'd like go viral. So since it was before the time of like everybody being influencers, I just like amassed like 50 or 100 girls and everybody had like 2,000 to 5,000 followers. And then together we were like a big influencer tweeting out on social media. Okay. So I know I'm like going off a tangent right now, but
I love it.
The blog got big. MTV caught wind. They did a small pilot. We used to have like online radio shows, which was the precursor of podcasts, right? Even when I was at Hot 97, I had little online radio shows with the DJs, which was like the precursor of podcasts. You'd be like, listen to my podcast at 3 p.m. on Wednesdays and Thursdays at alistradio.net. You know, like that was the way that was like the before podcasts were a thing. So nothing happened with MTV the first time. And we just like kept building, just kept blogging, building. We'd host concerts and events, and we kind of turned into an event company. So the same DJs that wouldn't hire me at Hot 97 now started to hire my team of girls to promote their parties. So we used to get paid to promote and go to like all these different DJ parties, okay? 3 years into it, now I was like getting older. It was like a little like weird to be the president of the Sorority of Hip Hop, like, 27 years old, way past college, but I was still doing it, and MTV was like, okay, like we're serious. We want to do this show. We got the approval. They like signed all of us. They filmed us all summer. They got a studio on Broadway, like literally like a hooked up studio with like neon signs. And like, I was like, I made it. They filmed us all summer, and I thought this was right after Jersey Shore ended. I thought that I was going to be like a major celebrity on MTV. I was going to be like the next Snooki, unfortunately, right? Like I literally was. And then 2 weeks before they were going to air the show, they filmed us all summer. They were going to air the first pilot episode on air. They pulled the plug. They're like, Hala, I'm sorry. We picked another show. We're moving in another direction. And at that point, I was like so devastated because I essentially got rejected from radio. Then I didn't even mention this, but like I almost was the co-host on Sway in the Morning. I got rejected from that. I like was hired for like 2 weeks and then fired, basically. Or like Sway just didn't like me. Okay. So I got rejected from satellite. Then I got rejected from TV, basically. And then I was like, all right, I just got to give up. I'm like a failure. I'm just going to throw in the towel. Like, I just worked for free basically for 6 years, just busting my ass, doing like all these events and whatever to try to scrounge by. And I had this big brand, but no money to show for it. And I was like, I'm going to shut this down. All the girls that I had this sorority with, they were my best friends. They all like hated me because I shut it down and like crushed their dreams. But I was the one who was like funding it all and whatever. I shut it down and I was like, okay, I'm just going to go get my MBA, go get a corporate job, and forget being a personality. I thought I would never get back on a mic. I was like, just forget this. And I just decided I was going to do something sustainable. So I went and got my MBA. That gave me a foot in the door in corporate, and I had a crazy resume. I had like a 2.3 GPA because I never went to school. I got a 4.0 on my MBA, but my undergrad was crazy. So like getting into an MBA school was crazy to begin with, but I did. I promised the graduate director I'd get a 4.0, and that's how they let me in. And I just went to my alma mater, the same school that I used to go to, and I explained my story. So I had to like beg to get my MBA. That gave me a foot in the door in corporate. I also had a crazy resume, and I thought that I was going to do so bad in corporate because I was like, oh my gosh, like here I am. All my friends have been in corporate for like years now. This is my first corporate job. I've like been hosting parties and doing a blog. But I joined Hewlett Packard and like I was like a rock star. I got promoted like 5 times in 5 years. I was the face of the Young Employee Network. I was president of the Young Employee Network. And I was just the same Hala, but inside corporate, being like an entrepreneur. And I was just doing the same stuff. I ended up being the one like interviewing the CMO and the CEO at the town halls. And like, I just did the same thing, but I was like kind of an influencer inside Hewlett Packard. And at the time there was like 300,000 employees at HP. So it was like a big platform. So I just became the face of the young employees essentially. So I did that. And 4.5 years or so into working at Hewlett Packard, I started getting the itch and I was like, man, like I want to get back to creating. Like the first time I didn't get an opportunity basically that I wanted in corporate, I was like, I'm sick of investing in somebody else. Like I just want to invest in my own thing. And I decided to launch Young and Profiting podcast. And I did it as a side hustle. Soon after I went and started working at Disney, and on the side, I just grew this podcast, and I essentially would wake up super early, work on all my content. I started posting on LinkedIn at this time. And I would do all my interviews during lunch. So I would like go find like closets in Disney and phone booths in Disney. There was no video at this time. And I would do interviews like anywhere that I could find. And I used to like go on the train with like a huge backpack with like heavy ass equipment and lug it to work every day on a 50-minute commute. And within 2 years, my podcast got pretty popular. So I'll pause there. I know I've been like rambling, but yeah, that's like my story of how I first at least started the podcast.
I knew this would happen. I was terrified to do this interview because there's a million things I could talk to you about. I want to take the time to just like pry a little bit into how the heck your brain works, because at every point where you seem to encounter a roadblock or someone tells you no, you're not giving up. Like you say you gave up and went to corporate, but even that, you didn't give up and go like just get whatever job. You still went and got your MBA. Mm-hmm. What goes through your mind when someone tells you no?
When somebody tells me no, I try to find out what is going to excite me to like get out of this rut immediately. And instead of sulking and being sad, I focus all my energy usually in learning something new. So when I got fired from Hot 97, it was learning how to build a website. Like literally got fired on a Thursday. On Sunday, I was like, how do I build a WordPress website? How do I code? Like, what do I do? Like, let me think of this like new idea. And then that just gets me out of the rut. And I feel like whenever I get rejected, I do that. The other thing that I try to think about, especially in hindsight, it's easy to think about this in hindsight. In the moment, I didn't know what I was doing, but in hindsight, I realized what I was doing. You can get to your destination in many different routes. So like my ultimate thing that I wanted to do was be a voice of my generation. I wanted to be a positive voice for my generation. So at first I thought that was radio. Actually, at first I thought I was going to be a singer. That we didn't even get into that. So like at first I thought I was going to be a singer. Then I was like, okay, I'm going to be a radio personality. Then I was like, okay, I'm going to be this big blogger. I'm going to be a TV personality. And then I was like, okay, I'm going to be the face of the young employees at Hewlett Packard. And then that wasn't big enough. I'm going to be a podcaster. And podcasting is something that I actually owned. So it was the first time that nobody could tell me no. And then it blew up because nobody could tell me no. And I was like, well, I'm going to figure this out. And something that we didn't talk about is that I had help from the start. In every instance, I was never scared to ask for help. By episode 8 of my podcast, I had 10 volunteers in a Slack channel that was helping me produce my show. I had 20 people over 2 years that worked for free for me. And they were fans that reached out on LinkedIn. I was an influencer on LinkedIn before my podcast got really big. And they'd be like, Hala, like your podcast changed my life. Like, I want to help you. And I knew how to do everything. I had so much marketing experience because I was essentially like working from 19, like hardcore in media, you know? So I knew how to audio edit. I knew how to video edit. I knew how to do social. I knew how to build websites. I knew how to graphic design. I knew how to do everything. So I was like, come work in my Slack channel. I'll teach you how to do all these things. And so I'd teach one guy how to do my websites, one guy how to edit my videos, one person how to edit my episodes. And I wasn't getting paid, so nobody cared to got paid. Like nobody was getting paid. I thought we just wanted to help people. So we just started this little movement called YAP, Young and Profiting, and I started a Slack channel. That Slack channel now is my company. And I have 60 employees all over the world. That same volunteer Slack channel that I started, episode 2 of my podcast, is literally YAP Media, the company now. And the volunteers that work for me are now business partners, equity, like all these things. So I was not afraid to ask for help from the very beginning so that I could really build something big and fast.
This podcast is brought to you by Teachable and therefore has no sponsors. So we just wanted to take a moment to encourage you to check out Hala's podcast, Young and Profiting, and her LinkedIn course at yapmedia.com/course. Creators like Hala are the reason this podcast exists, so supporting them helps support our ability to bring you more of their stories and lessons. You can find more from Hala at Young and Profiting Podcast, which is also linked in the show notes or description, wherever you're watching or listening. Okay, now back to the episode. The more I've learned about you and your journey, you're consistently trying things that there isn't a roadmap for. Like even Twitter as an example, or even podcasting, like when you did it, yes, it was a thing, but the way you did it, you kind of always find your own way. Who are you learning from, or where do you get the guts to just go?
It's just like relentless action, like obsession, relentless action, obsession, like taking action every day. Again, getting help so that everyone's taking action and everyone's clear on what they need to do and everyone's taking action so we can take action faster, right? But it's like relentless action, making quick decisions, not being afraid to like fail, pivot, find something that works, lean into that, fail, pivot, find something that works, lean into that, right? So I just take action really quickly. Now, the more that I grow as an entrepreneur, the more that I have to be more strategic and more careful. And I can't be this like, you know, innovative like inventor all the time, right? I need to like focus. But in general, I would say the way that I get things started is just by taking like relentless action and skill stacking. It's like all the skills that I learned and all the experiences that I had. I've always been a really hard worker. I've always, like since I was 19, had multiple jobs, multiple responsibilities, taking every opportunity that I can. And it gave me so many skills that I was able to stack them. And I'm not the best at everything, but together I'm the best podcaster, right? So I'll give you an example. I learned skill stacking from Scott Adams. And basically, he's a cartoonist, and he's one of the most famous, well-paid cartoonists in the world. He worked in corporate. He had corporate experience. His cartoon is about corporate work. He was funny. He could draw okay. He wasn't the funniest comedian in the world. He wasn't the most accomplished corporate person in the world. He wasn't the best drawer in the world. But he put those unique skills together and became the #1 cartoonist. Me, it's like I'm really good at public speaking. I've got great energy. I know how to market. I'm decent at audio, video, whatever, like, and I put all those skills together and now I'm a top 100 podcaster, right? But it was from all those skills that I gained in the past, like even skills from working at the mall, you know, helped me become personable and sell now millions of dollars in agency services, right? So it's just like all these experiences help you later on. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if it's immediately replicable for everyone, but it gives a goal. So part of the reason I wanted to talk to you about webinars is, first off, because you are so good at them. And also, it's my hypothesis, like, the more we'll see AI generated content, webinars or tools like that, where you're actually showing up live with people, are going to become more and more critical for creators. And it's a skill I don't see a lot of people pulling off like you do. When and how did you start doing webinars, and how do they fit into your business at the moment?
So webinars is something I started probably about 2 years ago. I didn't start them until I actually had a course. So I launched a LinkedIn masterclass 2 years ago, or 2.5 years ago maybe. And that's when I started leveraging webinars. So I'll tell you the story of like why I decided that webinars was a thing for me. So just so everybody tuning in understands, like, I have a social media agency, a podcast agency. It's an award-winning agency. It's very high ticket, right? So just to work with me, it's $10,000 a month to start on LinkedIn, and it goes up from there. And so I wanted to start teaching people how to do LinkedIn in a way that was more affordable, because I know that not everybody can afford 10K services. And I also don't want to scale my agency like that. I don't want to have 1,000 employees in my agency. I'm scaling my network, which is a whole other conversation, right? So I wanted to put out a course. And so I decided I was going to actually now I have an on-demand course on Teachable, which I love. But when I first started, I had a live course, a live 2-day masterclass. And so when I first started talking about my course, I had a lot of people on social media that were really bought in to what I taught about social media. And they were clamoring for a course, because for 2 to 3 years, all I did was just provide value, provide value, provide value. Everything was for free. I would do like Clubhouse Q&As. I would do LinkedIn Live Q&As. And I would just give people advice about LinkedIn, teach them what I learned from running all these client accounts. And I already knew everything about LinkedIn, but I never had formalized it into a course. So people were dying for a course from me. So the first like 2-3 masterclass launches, we were sold out right away. We got like 40-50 people to sign up, pay $2,000 each to do it. And I would do these live masterclasses. But by like the 4th, 5th time, it was like really hard to get people. And my team was like scrambling, like trying to DM and whatever. And we're like, what's going on? Why isn't this working? And it turns out that like we had converted everybody who was going to buy from us already in my ecosystem. And we needed to get new eyeballs and warm them up. We need to warm them up in the middle of the funnel. I had done that already through years of social content. I'd warm people enough up where they didn't need to see me live. They didn't need to hop on a call. They would just convert in the DMs for a while. But then now we needed to bring in new leads and have a way to warm them up. And that's where I discovered that webinars are really the answer for that. I tried doing paid ads. It was a disaster. I paid $30,000 and I brought people to a webinar, but they didn't convert because they just didn't have enough exposure to me. So I found that my working formula is getting people top of funnel through my social platforms and then driving them to a webinar for a mid-funnel engagement and then converting them on the webinar. So that's really my flow for my webinar funnels. So that's how I discovered webinars. It was a way to warm up my leads to help me kind of make sure that I was able to consistently get course sales.
Because you make so much different content, I imagine your top of funnel is pretty broad compared to like the right fit for the webinars. Are you really targeted with getting people into those webinars, or is it you offer it to everyone that comes through the door?
Yeah, that's a really great post. That's a really great post, Jonah.
Thanks, I'll go publish.
Thanks, Jonah. That's a really good point. So basically, we retarget all the posts that would make sense. So basically, every post is different on my page because, to your point, I do talk about a lot of different things. That's actually to my disadvantage, but it's to my advantage in some things like sponsorships. I have a broad audience. I have a lot of listeners because I have a broad topic. I make a lot of money per commercial on my podcast. So it's advantageous for that, but it's not great when I'm trying to target people to a specific webinar about one specific thing. I talk about LinkedIn when I talk about sales, marketing, entrepreneurship, all this other stuff. But what we do is we just retarget the posts that make sense. So anybody who likes and comments on a post that's about LinkedIn tips, we then invite them to the webinar. Okay. We also might go to my lookalike profiles, other competitors on LinkedIn who talk about LinkedIn, and target those people who are liking and commenting on those posts. So we find people based on where they're hanging out and then retarget them specifically based on the topic of the webinar, whatever the webinar is.
Retarget them with paid media?
Retarget them with just direct messages. We just DM them.
That's your top of funnel, is DMing people who are hanging
Commenting.
out in the relevant spaces where your webinar can serve them.
Exactly. So it's people who are liking and commenting on my LinkedIn posts on LinkedIn or Instagram. It's people who are registered for LinkedIn training events on LinkedIn. It's people who are in LinkedIn groups. It's people who are following other LinkedIn influencers. It's people who want to learn about LinkedIn. We're then trying to DM them on LinkedIn usually or Instagram. And this can go for any webinar. Like if I do a sales webinar, I'm targeting people who are interested in sales and I'm finding those people.
And then are you doing all of these webinars live, or do you have them pre-recorded?
I do all my webinars live. The only thing that I do on demand is my Teachable course, which is the best of my masterclass that I did. We've taken all the best content and then we've put it into an on-demand course, but that's the only on-demand thing that I have.
And then how often are you doing these webinars?
When I'm in a mode for pushing, I'm doing them probably twice a month. And I'll probably do like 2 or 3 webinars to get maybe like 50 students to pay $2,000.
This is so cool. First off, that concept of top of funnel is very different than I think a lot of creators who feel solely stuck to just like making more content. Like if they need more top of funnel, their only answer is I have to grow my YouTube channel or grow my audience. So that's why I was like gawking for a second that you're just thinking of these communities as relevant people.
Yeah, I will say that the conversion is much stronger when they're engaging on my posts. So still for us, it's like, how do we make sure our posts are getting a lot of impressions and engagement so that we could target new users? So that's definitely a huge part of it. I don't want people to get mistaken with that. However, we are constantly trying to pull in relevant users into my world proactively, even when we're not promoting, because we know we need new DMs. We need to have an ample amount of DMs in order to execute any sort of webinar that we have. And the other thing I'll say is that the more that you do webinars, you grow your email list, right? That's one of the big benefits of a webinar is you get their name and their email. So now every time I have a webinar, I also get to email 20,000 people, hey, I got a webinar, and people love my webinars, especially if it's a new one, right? So now I just have a list of people that will buy from me and attend all my different webinars.
This is something I want to address because the webinar you did for Teachable a couple weeks ago, it felt like everything was on the table. Like if I followed all the advice you gave me, I could have a functional business. Mm-hmm. When you're doing that like twice a month, how do you think about what you're giving away versus what's in the course? Because I know still a lot of creators who like they have an audience, they've made a little money, but they haven't like figured out how to make it full time. Mm-hmm. They struggle with like, why would anyone buy my course if I give all of this away? But that webinar was basically a full course. So where do you make the sell after you give it all up like that?
So usually it's just 5 to 10% of what you teach you want to put in your webinars. So that might have felt like a lot, but I give a lot of info in my, like, for example, my LinkedIn course. So it's usually 5 to 10% of what you would teach. And a lot of the webinar is actually just like engaging with them, warming them up. So it's like you want to get them to engage. You want to tell your story on this webinar. You want to give them one framework to walk away with that's actionable so they felt like they learned something. That framework is going to be 5 to 10% of whatever you give in your course, right? You want to handle objections throughout your webinar. And it's basically like a little formula. And what you want to do is have like 2 to 3 versions of this webinar because people will attend multiple webinars. So the educational framework portion, you want like, you know, eventually I have like 3 versions of my LinkedIn Secrets webinar, you know, that I'll just rotate so that people always feel like it's a little fresh, that they learned something. And you don't want to overwhelm them with information. So our webinar was a little bit different because I was promoting Teachable. And it was like meant to be like a real educational thing that then leads to Teachable. Rather, for my LinkedIn course, I'm really careful about not overwhelming with information, because then people will be like, this is too much. I'm not good enough. I'm never going to learn this. And they get like fear of taking the course, right? So you want to make sure it's like easy and not too much where like, whoa, I got so much. It's going to take me a year just to action on this, So you don't want to scare them away with too much info.
It sounds like you also kind of have more of a launch approach to selling. Like, what's the logic behind when you do that versus when you don't?
When I first started my course, it was live courses. So it was a live 2-day masterclass. And like, you can't promote too early because people will forget. So it's like usually like a 30-day ramp up. And then we go super hard like the last week or two with webinars and emails and like trying to get people to convert and promo codes and discounts and things like that to try to get people to convert. For the on-demand webinar, I'm also considering taking an approach like that, because right now doing it like consistent hasn't been working that well. It really works better when it's like a full effort where it's like DMs and multiple posts. And for this on-demand course that I have, I'm going to actually be taking more of an affiliate approach. And I'm going to be working with other creators in my network to actually push my course through affiliates rather than me being the one only pushing it. So like I'll guest on Jenna Kutcher's show and she'll have an affiliate, or Russell Brunson and he'll have an affiliate. And I'm coming up with some cool models where basically I'm going to give my creators like half of the affiliate rev share or even more that will apply to their social media bill if I run their social media, so that they basically get social for free in return for just pushing my course. Because it's on demand. I don't have to do work on it anymore. So for me, I'm like, okay, this is like a really valuable course. It's like free money. They have an audience that wants it. They could just do, a 1-week promo, get 50 people to sign up, and then they've got $100,000 to apply towards their social bill for the year. Win-win for everyone.
We got to bring this just a little closer to the ground. Like you've made some money, you know that this exists, but trying to get to that point of like going from like a few thousand a month to actually making a full-time living. Like, I'm coming to you saying, I want to do webinars. What are the bare bone requirements that I need in place, and when is the right time to start doing it?
Okay. Number one, you need an audience, like we were talking about before. So you need to post really educational, meaningful content that people will actually gain from, that will get people to share it. Okay. It has to be so good and so unique that people will want to share your stuff so that you get more eyeballs. So that's number one. You need eyeballs. None of this is going to work if you have no impressions on your posts. Okay. But that doesn't mean that you're not going to make any sales, because if you have something valuable and it's really great quality and you can charge $1,500 for it or $1,000 for it, if you get 10 people, that's $10,000. And that's totally doable to get 10 people to take your course per month, right? So it doesn't have to be a large amount of people, but you need to understand, like, what is your goal? What is your pricing? How can you make it an offer that seems well worth that price so that you can just get 10 people and make $10,000 a month, right? That's number one. Once you have more volume, you can have a lower ticket item, right? So you want to think about that. The other thing you want to think about is making sure that you have something that people actually want. So much of creators' downfalls is they don't actually have an audience because there's nobody that wants the product that they have. So you need to actually find a pain point that people are willing to pay for. It has to be a real problem, and it has to be a problem where people share the identity of having that problem. They all hang out in the same place. They're all following the same influencers, wanting the same tools, speaking the same language, right? You want to find a community of people who have the problem that you want to solve. And that needs to happen before anything else. Do not go create a course, buy a website, buy a logo, this and that without validating that you actually have an audience with a pain point that can afford your services. So for example, your audience is your choice. So don't be a resume writer for people who don't have a job. They can't pay you. They don't have a job, right? So think about I decided that I was going to do social media services for CEOs and celebrities because I wanted them to pay me a lot. And regular people don't have money to pay me $10,000 a month for social media services, right? So your audience is your choice. So first of all, think about make sure you have the right audience, the right idea to serve them, the right product, and just do things bit by bit, okay? Just do one thing really good. Figure out the one thing that you're awesome at that you want to teach people and focus on that. And if there is a problem to solve there, right? So you're saying oh, Hala has this big empire. I built my empire brick by brick. Anything I figured out for myself, I then offered to other people. I figured out how to go viral on LinkedIn. I started selling LinkedIn services. I figured out how to produce my podcast. I then did production services. I figured out how to monetize my podcast. I started monetizing other people's podcasts, right? So do it for yourself first. If you don't have the social proof of doing it for yourself, it's going to be a really tough sell. So one of the best things to do is actually make sure that you yourself are the social proof of why people should buy whatever product or course that you have.
There's so much you laid out there that is contrary to how a lot of businesses work, but is the core of how creators work, which is why I love my job. And I also think it's the direction the world's going, to build the audience first, find the problem and then fix it, not build a solution and then desperately try and find someone who needs it.
Yeah. And if you have the general thing of what you like to talk about, then you can just start to ask your audience, what do you want from you? They'll tell you what they want. They'll literally tell you what they want. An example with me is the guests that would come on my show. I never wanted to start a social media podcast agency. It was not on my radar. My guests after the show would be like, hey, could you do LinkedIn for me? Could you produce my podcast? And I would say, no, until one day I was like, all right, so many of you are asking me. I guess I'll do your social, I did
want to take a little bit to just kind of get your perspective of even just the next 3 to 5 years of where this space is going for creators. For someone who hasn't fully figured out this as a business or this as a job, there's going to be a million reasons to quit. Yeah. But what do you think the future holds, and why is it important to continue struggling in that place? Because it's not easy to do this.
Yeah, I would say you got to get started. Get started as a side hustle if you're in corporate. I see where I am now, and I'm always oh my gosh, I'm so thankful that I worked so hard over the last 8 years and that I started this journey 7 years ago, starting my podcast and posting as a side hustle and this and that, and worked through weekends and sacrificed. I'm so happy now because I have so much freedom. And I have so much job security and I have so many revenue streams and so much going on that I see my friends who just stayed in corporate, they're laid off, they're struggling to get jobs, they're getting contract work, and they have no job security. And I would be terrified if I was in their position. And I feel bad because I don't want to scare people listening, because I know that a lot of you are probably working corporate. But this is my message to you is start building something on the side that you own. Just start now. Don't worry about what other people are thinking. Don't worry about what your company will think. Just start posting and building your personal brand, because the future is creator entrepreneurship. Every big CEO now knows that they've got to be on social media, and so many people are just late to the game. That, and start using AI tools. AI is going to take over whether you like it or not. So how can you just start using AI tools in your daily workflow? Now I use AI tools for everything, and unfortunately, I see it in my business. We're using AI so much that we're we don't need this person anymore. We don't need this person anymore. And it's helping me as a thinker. AI is going to help you. If you're a person who's inventive and you love to think and you love to work hard, AI is just going to accelerate and amplify everything that you do. If you're somebody who needs other people to think for you, AI is going to take your job. So you've got to figure out how to leverage AI in your workflows. Just start getting used to it, start embracing it, and start posting online, start getting passionate about something. The other thing is, like, if you're not passionate about something, that's going to hurt too. Like, the future is creative. The future is creative.
Last question is just, when you have built such entities, but all the businesses that you have, I'm always suspicious that inherently there's things you can't change that you would, if you could. Like, what are one or two things that if you could go back, you would fundamentally change about the business you've built that you can't change now that it's so big?
I don't know if I have a good answer for that. What is one thing that I would change about the business? Okay, so I have two sides of my business. One side is a social media production agency. One side is my network. The social media and production agency is very talent heavy. So every time I have 3 more clients, I need to hire 5 more people. Where on the network, we grow and monetize podcasts. That is very scalable because it's the same amount of work, whether it's a huge podcaster with 1 million downloads a month or one that has 20,000 downloads a month. So we just get big podcasters and I can service 35 podcasters with like 4 people, right? So it's really scalable, really high margins, whereas the social agency, I've got to hire a lot of talent and it's very like manpower intensive and I have to pay a lot of salaries. So social agency is something that I'm not scaling because I know that it just doesn't have the same margins and scalability as a network. So in hindsight, maybe I would have done like maybe a cheaper offer that I don't need to hire such high. I could just do international talent and you know, pay less salaries or whatever. But honestly, like I feel like I've designed my business and entrepreneurship is an evolution. So anything that you were saying, if there's one thing you change, I could change anything I want whenever I want, right? So I have been changing everything all the time. Everything is changing all the time. And that's how you pivot and stay relevant and win.
I love that answer. Hala, before we wrap up, anything else you wanted to say before we leave it?
No, I just really enjoyed my time with you, Jonah. If you guys want to check out my podcast, go to Young and Profiting. If you want to check out my course, it's yapmedia.com/course on Teachable. And yeah, I just loved connecting with you.
Thank you so much, Hala. And
Thanks,
have a
Jonah.
wonderful day. Thanks for your time. Hala is an incredible example of how rejection can be the catalyst for building something extraordinary. Her journey from unpaid radio intern to media CEO showcases the power of resilience, skill stacking, and the willingness to pivot when necessary. By building multiple revenue streams and creating opportunities for others, she's not just built a successful business, but sustainable career freedom. I hope you learned as much as I did today, found something that you can apply to your life, and if nothing else, were inspired by Hala's story to take a hard look at your 9-to-5 and make sure that the way you work is working for you. If you want to join the thousands of other creative entrepreneurs who are building an income out of their impact, click the link in the description to join the club and learn how Teachable can help you do the same. And if you found this episode valuable, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and check out our recommended next episodes linked here. Thanks for being here, and we'll catch you in the next one.